Othello is not only one of Shakespeare's great tragic heroes, one of the four great tragic heroes of the four great tragedies, but Shakespeare's greatest black character, his most important, most central African diaspora character. Othello is called a Moor. This is a word that means two different things, or at least two different things that overlap in Shakespeare's English. It means people we would call black sub-Saharan Africans, and it means North African Muslims, people we would consider Arabs, people from Morocco. Which is which is Othello? Well, on one level, he's kind of both. Not only does that word mean both things in Shakespeare's English, but Shakespeare's contemporaries can't always quite distinguish. The two categories don't seem separate to them as they clearly do to us, as is in the real world they are. Um, it is the case that societies, especially xenophobic societies, can sometimes have odd, blurred categories where they can't tell different foreign groups apart or conflate them in weird ways. So, some people will tell you that Othello is not black, that he is the other kind of Moor, that he's a kind of Muslim chieftain. And unfortunately, our edition has inside a picture of a famous 19th century actor dressed up just like that. It is unquestionable that Othello is what we would call black. Well, how do we know this? We know this through Iago's derogatory comments about his appearance, right? About his color, about his lips, about all that stuff, right? Which makes Othello, I'm saying, which makes Iago not particularly palatable to us because Iago is very clearly a racist among his many other flaws. Um, Let me talk quickly about blackface. Now, this was initially performed in blackface, something which in American culture especially has become taboo, though apparently not taboo enough because you still see people doing it in the 21st century when they should know better. None of Shakespeare's fellow actors, to our knowledge, were dark skinned. So they would color their skin in order to play characters of different ethnic groups. So we have accompaniment today from a young child who is singing a little bit and is very much into atonal music. She's very modern that way. That is, I don't mean to excuse blackface in 1604, but because history does not just lead us to progress, it leads us to regress sometimes. Sometimes things do not get better, get worse. Blackface in the theater becomes a worse and worse thing, and now there's a terrible history that Americans have to deal with. In America, blackface becomes associated in the 19th century with the minstrel show tradition, a popular variety show form of music and comedy um, in which white performers would black up and play goofy caricatures of African Americans to mock and belittle and stereotype. If you ever doubt the power of theater to change the world, some of America's persistent stereotypes of African Americans originate in the minstrel show tradition, are things that minstrel show performers made up, not biases that were out there that the minstrel show performers just then channeled. No, new bad ideas that they introduced, new lies they made up that then became part of the racist lexicon. Now, in this, in with this history behind us, it is very difficult. It is very, very difficult to imagine putting on blackface without evoking that minstrelsy and that belittling of our African American fellow citizens. There's almost no non-racist way to do it. So it has become toxic in the American tradition in a way that Shakespeare couldn't imagine yet. History does not always follow a narrative progress. Some things get worse. Race relations were not good in 1600, but they got much, much worse. Like the English attitude towards other races was not great in 1600. It got much, much worse. That said, um, the minstrel show tradition lasts into the television era, and still weirdly pops up now and then. The the tradition of playing Othello in blackface persists well into the late 20th century, by actors who do not imagine themselves as belittling him, including actors, including British actors who think they're playing a hero. There are pioneering African diaspora actors. One of the first is the great Ira Aldridge in the 19th century, who play Othello without makeup, just in their own skin. But in this country, it doesn't become routine until the great actor Paul Robeson in the 20th century really makes the role his own and kind of moves forward into be this that like where we start to in America think of this as a role where you're supposed to get someone who is African American. We could get like, wait, why dress up in blackface when we could get James Earl Jones? Now, saying all this, blackface seems to us almost the worst thing you can do about race in the theater, and there are reasons to think that. Summer before last, I was researching some 19th century American actors. Actually, I was trying to research what happens when the most racist 19th century actor I could think of played Othello. It isn't pretty. The thing is, in the 19th century, in this country, Othello was very seldom played in blackface. He was actually played in brownface. From 1820 on, where Edmund Kean in Britain first decides to perform as a Moorish hero, this becomes a standard move in 19th century and into the early 20th century performances of Othello, and it becomes hugely popular, especially among American actors. Why? Because American actors vastly prefer to imagine Othello as brown and not black. Racist, like pre-Civil War and post-Civil War American actors would rather put on brown face than face the idea that one of Shakespeare's great heroes actually has black skin. Because they are unwilling, they have in fact lost the ability to imagine that someone black can speak as eloquently, be as wise, have as many heroic virtues as Othello does.